Something I struggled with as a kid and in high school, and even to this day, was self-doubt. Like, I don't see myself there, but how God sees me and how I see myself are two completely different things.
Welcome to the Beyond Sunday podcast, where we continue the conversation of God. Beyond Sunday. My guest today is a good friend of mine. He is a professional photographer. His name is Ryan Sepulveda. Did I say that right?
That's right. Ryan Sepulveda.
Sepulveda.
Yeah.
What's going on, Ryan?
How's it going, Kevin?
I haven't talked to you in a while. I know, long time no see, dude. So let's get straight into this.
Let's go.
All right. So I want to know your first. Well, how about this? Your upbringing.
Yeah.
How was that like? Because if I remember correctly, I believe you were raised in the church.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this a while back, but I think I'm fifth generation apostolic.
Fifth
Pentecost.
generation apostolic. Oh,
so
wow.
There's myself, my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents. Okay, so maybe that's fourth generation. My kids are the fifth generation.
Oh, that's cool, man.
Yeah,
So
born and raised in Sanger. I was born in Sanger. Went to the Sanger church pretty much my whole life up until I got married, and yeah.
So how's that experience? Like, how was it growing up in church for you? Were you like a kid who was like studying his Bible every day, or were you more like, I'm just going because, my parents want me to go?
Yeah. So I would say I was a little bit in between. I wasn't that hardcore, always reading, always studying, but being in church and all of that was all I knew. I didn't know anything else. And I went to church because obviously my parents went and they brought me. I was that kid sleeping under the pews when I was younger.
I relate.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't. That's all I knew. All I knew growing up.
So, what about your mindset though? Like when it comes to God, did your parents like really teach like the fundamentals of the gospel, or were you just learning through like Sunday school?
So it was both. My parents definitely instilled in me the values and the foundation of the Bible and God, which they learned from my grandparents. And, Sunday school was a huge part of it, just going to Sunday school every Sunday morning. And yeah, it wasn't, I never felt forced or anything. It was just all I knew, and I was comfortable with it. I enjoyed going to Sunday school class and just being there with my friends when I was a kid, and yeah.
Cool. And then so that's elementary, middle school, high school, pretty much the same thing.
Yep.
Did you have any did you go? Were you in public school?
Yeah. So I went to a couple public schools in Sanger, Madison, and Lone Star, and then I went to Sanger High School.
And then so how was that, like being in school, like in the sense of being surrounded by people who probably don't have the same beliefs as you? Sure.
So I wouldn't say I was really a hardcore Christian apostolic kid going to school. I didn't have my Bible with me. I wasn't that hardcore.
Yeah.
But I definitely remember in high school, just trying to fit in like any other high school kid. I didn't really want to be the church kid, I guess you could say. So I wanted to fit in because I thought of myself as kind of the awkward, like any other high school kid would think of themselves. I played sports and all that, but the biggest thing for me was just trying to fit in. And although I had my foundation in church, it wasn't something that I was like promoting of myself, I guess you could say.
Yeah. No, and I relate to that 100%.
Yeah.
Especially fitting in. Especially if you're in sports. What sports did you play?
Yeah, I played basketball since I was probably 5 years old, and I played basketball in high school.
How tall are you so that people can know?
6'2". You can't tell.
I'm honestly, like, for me, this is, I'm very competitive, right? Yeah. So when I see somebody taller than me, it's an automatic, I think you play basketball, and I dislike you a little bit. But that's just me.
It's cool, man.
Because you're taller, and so it hurts my ego a little bit.
It's all right. I don't take offense to that.
Okay, so basketball.
Yeah.
Now I know the culture for people playing in sports and stuff, but did that affect you ever? Like knowing like people are probably like out like after a game or after school or even after practice, hey, let's go hang out afterwards. Did you deal with that in any way?
So just growing up in church, I was very much sheltered.
Uh-huh.
And so going into high school, because in middle school, I went to Lone Star, which was a smaller country school, and they had, a middle school. And so going from that to high school, it was a bit of a culture shock. But um, yeah, just being in high school, you always hear people going to parties, doing stuff. And, I kind of had an idea of what that stuff was, but I honestly didn't really know.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't let it influence me, or I tried not to let it influence me, but it wasn't something that I was curious about. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess by the grace of God, I never got invited to parties. I like my teammates talked about that kind of stuff, but it wasn't something like,
They're probably aware
yeah,
maybe how you carried yourself and stuff, like, oh, this guy probably doesn't want anything to do with.
yeah.
I mean, if you
So
never talked about it,
right,
I'm assuming like if you didn't talk about it with them or
right,
engage in conversation in regards to like smoking weed or whatever like that, they probably assumed like you wanted nothing to do with it.
yeah. So that's what I was gonna say too. Is like I'm pretty sure they had an idea. It's like
You should have
this,
done
he's different, so let's maybe not try to corrupt him. But
the.
yeah, I think they definitely had an idea, and I always thank God, thinking back, because it could have dove into some things that I probably shouldn't have. But
Oh yeah, for sure. Let me ask you, like, what were some things you might have struggled with though, like going through high school, like.
yeah, so for sure, I always felt, maybe it was because of my upbringing and being sheltered, I felt like an outcast. Like,
Mm.
um, and it wasn't something that really like affected me in a way where I felt bad about myself.
Mm-hmm.
But like any other high school kid, you're trying to figure out who you are as a person
Yeah,
and
yeah,
what
yeah.
what things you like. But I definitely felt like, because being in sports too, it's like you got the jocks, you got the geeks, and I found myself like being in between,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't like my friends. None of them played sports. Like I was the only one in my group that played sports, and they were into all the other non-sports stuff, like
Mm-hmm.
playing cards, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, like all that stuff.
You get what, yeah.
Um, and so I definitely felt like an outcast. And it wasn't something that affected me in a negative way, I could say, but I could also say like I made myself comfortable with both sides too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, that's high school. Let's carry on to college, because
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure college too is a different ball game. Did you go to dorms at all?
No, so I just went to, so after high school, I went to Reedley College, so that was just a short trip from home, so I always stayed at home. And then after Reedley College, I went to Fresno State, and so the classes, the courses, the teachers, the other students, like again, it was another culture shock. I'm coming
Mm.
from little, Sanger High School, and although Reedley College isn't that much bigger, it was still just a different world that high school doesn't always prepare you for.
Mm-hmm. Give us an example.
Um, so I heard a lot more about partying and drinking and all that stuff
Mm.
in college, which heard a little bit about it in high school, and you're an adult now in college, so
Yeah, it's like.
uh, to, s- I couldn't say it was really enticing to me. Again, I didn't want to. I knew where I came from, and I was very solid in my foundation that I never, like, I could say I got invited to parties from college, but it wasn't something like, let me go try this out. Because again, I was at home, and probably my biggest thing was always not wanting to disappoint my parents, because I knew like where I came from,
Mm-hmm.
um, the foundation that they had built for me, all the um, can't think of the word, but all the values that they instilled in me. It's like,
So when you say the fear of your parents, I relate to that 100%,
yeah,
because a lot of things I didn't do was because I didn't want to disappoint my dad.
yeah,
That's mostly.
yeah,
I knew like my dad knew I did that. Oh man,
yeah.
So in any, did you have any, I guess, like what was I going to say? The fear of God is what I'm trying to say. Did you ever feel that?
Yeah. So on top of, fear of disappointing my parents, I definitely had the fear of God. And maybe that was just, being a church kid my whole life,
Yeah, yeah.
and hearing, parents or Sunday school teachers say like, "Oh, God's always watching."
Yeah.
Like, and so I guess in the back of my mind, I always had that instilled in me. And not to say that I was perfect or didn't make mistakes or didn't disappoint my parents. I had my shortcomings, and but yeah, I could always say that I had that. I guess you can call it
Yeah.
fear.
You see, for me, it would be more like when I was younger,
Mm-hmm.
it was more of the fear of God, right?
Yeah.
But then as I got older, if I'm just being honest, right, I struggled with fitting in a little bit, right? Where I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to.
Yeah.
I didn't indulge in extracurricular activities that other people did. And I separated myself, but I would say more it was the fear of my father than it was, if I'm just being honest,
Yeah.
than it was with God.
Yeah.
Um, so I was just wondering that dynamic. But okay, so college. First, we got to give a props to your parents for instilling in that in you, right? I
Yeah.
mean, because that is a valuable thing. Like, even though you like sometimes we might feel like, oh yeah, we're sheltered, and I feel like that to an extent. But the other side of it is like, um, you're I guess you're more protected from doing things that can cause damage to your future,
Right.
right? Because of those values that your parents instilled.
Right.
So it's like I'm just speaking like where I can relate
Mm-hmm.
to that, because sometimes I've heard it before with other people too, where it's like, oh yeah, you do. I never did anything as a kid. I mean, growing up,
Yeah.
oh, my parents didn't let me do anything. Um, but then now, like, that they're older, right, and like they possibly could have averted get it going down a path where sometimes some people would have come back from. I
Right.
mean, and you see it all the time, right?
Right.
Like, you see um, friends from high school, like where they're at now, it's like it's sad,
Right.
right? Because they went from like, oh, it was just weed, to now it's like, oh, now you're going into like, or it's like hallucinogens and stuff.
Right.
So, anyways, that's a fun little tangent I just went on. But okay, so college, continue.
Yeah. So I took the super senior route. So I was in college for about 5.5, 6 years. 2 years at Reedy College. It was a smaller college, and um, different experience than going to Fresno State, where I
Mhm.
was there for 4 years. But yeah, just the people there, the things they talk about is a whole different level
It's a whole different level, huh?
compared to high school. And I mean, for me, again, being sheltered, I thank God for that I didn't get into any of that stuff. But I was also working, going to school full time. I was in the honors program at Reedy College, and so it was just, always being involved with school kept me
Mhm.
away from other things. And being involved in church heavily was also just something that kept me busy, kept my mind on the straight and narrow. And yeah, those temptations or those things were there in college, but again, thankfully I had that foundation. And again, not to say I was perfect or didn't make mistakes, but it definitely kept me on the right track.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Can you tilt it a little bit more like this?
This way.
No, the other way. Right there.
Right there.
Perfect.
Cool.
Cool. So, involved in church. What did you do in church? How were you involved?
Yeah, so let's see. I think I'm trying to think of when I got baptized. It was 2007, so I was 17.
Wait.
Uh,
For the people, how old are you?
So I am 32.
32. What year did you graduate high school?
2008.
2008.
Yeah.
Okay. 32. Okay.
Yeah.
Just so people have a.
Yeah.
You know.
So yeah, I graduated in 2008. Got baptized in 2007, so that was my junior year. And so after, I'm trying to think when I first got involved with youth leadership. I think it was after high school. Started off as a treasurer at my local church in Sanger Apostolic Church, and did that for about a year and maybe a couple years, and then I ended up becoming the youth president at
Wow,
the
youth
Apostolic.
president.
Yeah, that was never expected that, but God has a plan, and God had a plan
Let me
for
ask
me.
you. Let me ask you then.
Mhm.
Why didn't you ever expect it?
Um,
Did
I
you never see yourself as in like a leadership role?
never, not growing up, not in high school, because again, I always felt like an outcast, even in church. So I
Mm.
felt that way in high school and felt that way in church. Um, and to be honest, to think back, I felt like the people that were in those positions when I was in high school, like they were just older, and I never saw myself in that position until I got older and had the opportunity to be there. And yeah, it was something that I guess kind of came naturally to
Mm.
me, because I mean, my dad's a minister, and so I always saw him in, higher
Mm.
roles in the church. And I felt like that could be a potential for me, just being in leadership. But something I struggled with as a kid and in high school, and even to this day, was self-doubt. Like, I don't see myself there, but how God sees me and how I see myself are two completely different things.
Mm.
And so even when I don't see that in my future, or saw that in my future, God did. And so God opened that door for me to come
And
into
how
leadership.
did he open, like, how did God present that opportunity for you though? Was it through like did your dad say you should
Um,
do it, or how did that work?
I think back then it was up to a vote. And
And so
so,
they voted for you. It was
yeah,
the youth voted for you.
yeah, the youth voted for me. And so I was like, all right, well, I can't really say no to that. I don't want to disappoint them. And so,
That's pretty cool. I
yeah,
mean, you probably never even expected them to vote for you,
I
right?
didn't. No, I
I
wouldn't
mean,
have
it's
voted for myself to be in that position. And so, yeah, that's,
well, I mean, imagine they saw you in almost a leadership kind of way, even though you didn't feel yourself that way,
yeah,
right?
for sure.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was very much a humbling thing. And
Or more like an uplifting thing, if anything, because humbling is to say like, oh, I was humbled,
yeah,
but maybe for you it might have been more uplifting in
for
the
sure.
sense of like you did not see yourself
Yeah,
ever, or you never even expected other people to see yourself that way.
yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty cool, because I've only known you as a youth leader
Right.
because you go to Clovis
Yeah.
eventually, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think you were the youth leader, right?
Yep.
See, so I've only seen you as um it would be like a calm demeanored youth leader.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I would never expect that you would say what you did, what
Yeah.
you just said, where you didn't, you had like, I always thought you were confident, especially playing ball. I'm like, yo, this guy's confident. Like, what?
Yeah, yeah.
You never trash talk, but
No, no. Very much a calm demeanor person. And
so
so,
that's cool. So you're a youth leader.
yeah.
Okay. What were some struggles that you saw? What were some struggles in the beginning of being a youth leader?
So again, I think going back to um, having that confidence, which I don't feel
Mm-hmm.
I have had back then or still have now.
Mm-hmm.
Self-doubt is always something that I struggled with, but um, just even being in the position, it's like, okay, like I saw people ahead of me, people that were older than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think comparing myself to others
The comparison game.
was a struggle back then as well. So it's like, okay, I saw them do it this way. I think I have to do it that way too. And so trying to fill into those shoes that were left and that opportunity was something I struggled with in the beginning.
Yeah, and the comparison game is terrible.
Yeah.
Because you can compare. I mean, nowadays, if you go on Instagram,
Right.
endless amount of people to compare yourself to,
Right.
and then making yourself feel so small
Right.
is so easy now.
Yep.
So no, that's deadly. The comparison game is deadly. So you
Yeah.
struggling with comparison, and what about leadership? Did that come to you naturally?
I think so. Um, again, I think just coming from my parents' background and seeing my dad as a minister and in all those roles, I wanted that for me too at some
Mm-hmm,
point. I didn't
mm-hmm,
know what exactly that would be or if
mm-hmm,
I was going to follow his same steps, but I guess you could say I always felt that calling. And, you know, whatever it was, I know serving God, you know, being a servant was definitely a calling. So any way I could help, I love helping people.
mm-hmm,
And so whether I had the title or not, I knew I could always, you know, find a role where I
mm-hmm.
could help somebody. And I think once I got into a leadership role and I saw that as what it was, is helping people, you know, along people that are your age in that same path, that helped me to really be like, okay, this is, you know, this is what I'm here to do at this time.
That's cool. And being a youth leader, what were some things you saw like that youth people like? What was like things that were very common amongst youth? Um, the youth
Yeah.
that they may have, came up to you about and be like, hey, look, I struggle with this, or what do I do here? This is happening.
I think a big thing was which I could relate to it to a certain extent, was a lot of people felt alone,
Mm,
like they felt alone, even if they came from a church family or they came from a good upbringing. They always came to church. Like a lot of them felt like they had nobody to turn to. And
mm-hmm,
for some reason, I don't know if it's a gift or whatever, but a lot of people felt comfortable opening up to me and coming to me. And so I think that was another reason why I fit into that leadership role
mm-hmm,
naturally. Is, again, I love helping people.
mm,
And I think that's just, you know, how God created me, whether it was a gift, whether it's a gift or not. But um, people always felt comfortable opening up to me, and they shared where their struggles were, and would ask for prayer. And, you know, I'm someone that I'm not gonna go to my best friend and say like, hey, you know, so and so's struggling with
yeah,
this.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
can you believe that? Like, that's not me. You know, I'm an open book where I can share things, and I can also keep things and just keep that between you and me.
So why do you think? Because you said that a lot of people struggled with loneliness
Yeah.
that grew up in the church,
Yeah.
right? Is that what you
Hmm.
said? Why do you think that is?
I mean, first, I think it's um, not an attack, but just something that the enemy puts in young people's mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, first of all, it's already hard as a Christian to live in this world, to fit in. Um, and so I think it's something that the enemy just puts in our minds, like, you already have this going against you. It's like you're also like, he just wants us to think that we don't have God to rely on, that we don't have people to rely on, and that we're all alone, and that
Mm-hmm.
eventually that'll turn into something where we go down the wrong path and
Yeah.
just completely off.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And like maybe him tempting you. I think too something where I felt that same way. Like I felt alone. I didn't really talk to anybody
Mm-hmm.
in regards to my problems.
Right.
Um, but I think what it might have been was the conflict of wanting to serve God,
Right.
but then also wanting to be a part with the world, like a
Right.
part of like indulge in some of the things that they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so like with that internal conflict, I sometimes didn't know who to talk to,
Right.
because sometimes I felt like, well, if I talk to my friends, right, they don't want to talk about God, right? But then I feel guilty about um I feel guilty when it comes to the activities they do.
Right.
But then if I go and talk to somebody from like a youth leader, or even a minister, I would feel almost like ashamed for things that maybe I'm doing, and I just don't really want to deal with the confrontation
Right.
of my friends telling me to stop going to church, right? Or let's just go party, right? But then I have that conviction, but then also feeling shame, and or also having somebody tell me not to do or separate yourself from certain individuals.
Right.
And I knew that's probably what they'd say, and I didn't want to hear it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like having one foot
Right.
with God and then one foot in the world. And it's like, man, I want to do both. So I that's a thought that I'm having, where I don't know if that's something that maybe that's why I felt lonely, because I never really thought about that,
Mm-hmm.
but I did feel lonely in
Right.
the sense of not talking to people.
Yeah.
So that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so loneliness. Yeah, yeah. No, I felt super relatable with that. Okay, so what would be advice you'd give somebody who felt lonely?
First, I'd probably just, try to, because I would feel alone too at times, and just try to relate to them and share with them that it's okay to feel that way. It's, we're human. We feel every emotion possible. Obviously because we're human, but that feeling alone is something that they're not alone in, because even church leaders feel alone, pastors feel alone, and so a lot of people don't understand that. They see people in higher positions like, oh, they don't struggle with anything. He's a pastor,
Mm-hmm,
like how could he possibly struggle? But once you're able to communicate with them that, this is just a title, it doesn't, prevent me from feeling these things that you feel. Just helps them, put them at ease that, they're not the one struggling. They're not the only one struggling with that. So that was always the first thing that I would try to make them understand. And then secondly, it's just opening their eyes or their understanding of who God is. God is, I always see God as the perfect parent. I come from, great parents, great upbringing, great grandparents.
Preface.
So it's like, even whether they come from that as well, it's like you can think of the most perfect parent that is always there for their child, always, supportive and whatever. And then you think of God, who is 100 times, 1,000 times much more than that, and just helping them to understand, it's like, you might feel alone, but it doesn't mean that God's not with you.
Mm-hmm.
God is always there. God is everywhere. And even in your darkest times, when you feel alone, God is still there with you. Maybe you don't think he's right there by your side, but is it because he's walked away or because you've walked away?
Mm-hmm.
And I promise you, it's not because God's walked away, because he's always right there with you. And you could be looking in one direction and not realize God's right behind you.
Mm-hmm.
He's always there. He's never left you. And so just helping them to understand that always helped too.
No, yeah, that's good advice right there, because sometimes, like, you feel lonely, you're like, you might be asking God, like, why am I going through this or whatever, but like, you might too be, are you like keeping that relationship with him,
Right.
right? Are you reading your Bible daily? Are you praying? You're right, where it's like, you he's not the one who's walked away. So if you feel like somebody's walked away, it's not him.
Right.
So that's super cool. So okay, youth leader.
Yep.
Okay, then I know you take away our youth leader, Kerman,
Yeah.
Nancy.
Yeah. So we can go to that, and I know she doesn't like sharing that story because she gets embarrassed. But we'll go
Hey,
there.
if she told you not to, if
No,
she told you,
she probably knows or doesn't know, but it's all right. I still she still loves me, so we'll go there. So yeah, my wife Nancy, um she went to church. I wish she was here to share her testimony. Maybe she can be a guest at some point.
oh yeah,
But
maybe we could do a couple
a couple's
interview
one. There we go.
because I also want to wait to share part of my testimony, which is with
Yeah.
my wife.
Yeah.
Like, it's her testimony.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do it without her.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somebody was it? Somebody
Was
would
it
do it. That's fine. But anyways, if you could only if you feel comfortable. And
Yeah. I can give the cliff notes of it. So my wife, she didn't grow up in church. She was a complete opposite, I would say, of my upbringing. You know, she didn't have that background. She didn't go to church. She knew of God, but she came from a Catholic home.
Mm.
And even in that sense, it's not like it was something that they were very committed to. You know, Hispanic, Mexican, you know, Catholic family is where she came from. And so I think it was in the fall of 2012, because I met her in 2013. You know, she just went through a bad breakup with her boyfriend at that time, and it wasn't somebody that, again, she didn't come from church, so it was just somebody that wasn't in church, but she had been dating him for a long time, and it was just, you know, something that was very, very hard on her. And she would be able to tell this part better, but she basically picked up a Bible and started reading it because she felt alone. She was looking for something, and she picked up a Bible and she started reading it, and in short, it came to life for her, you know. And she was just constantly reading the Bible, and she went to high school with a fellow Kerman church person. I think she was going to Sanger at that time, but so I knew her. It was a fellow friend, but Janinzi Medina. So they went to high school. They were the same age, and so I think at one point she invited her to church, which was the Kerman church, and so
A-Top at the time.
Yeah, A-Top, and so she went and
Shout out A-Top.
She went and she never looked back because, again, the Bible was coming to life for her. It was just something that was growing inside of her, and she went because I think she had visited other churches, but it wasn't
as good as
she didn't feel comfortable. Yeah, prior to A-Top, she didn't feel comfortable, or it just, you know, it wasn't it. And so she went to A-Top, and
it was it.
I'm
telling you, dude.
It came to life that much more for her. It's like everything in the Bible that she was reading was actually here in person at church. And so,
that's cool.
Yeah, that was her first experience. And I think she was there for maybe a month and she got baptized. It was probably less than that. And, yeah, again, it was something that came very natural to her because it was something that she was looking for, something that she read about in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And it was there. It's like, this is what she was looking for.
Yeah.
And so that was early 2013. And then I forget how old we were. We were like 22, 23. So, you know, involved with the youth, going to youth events. And it was a pre-camp concert at Jubilee Church. And so...
Oh, no. Keep going.
And I was a youth leader at that time, and so I think we were like just welcoming people in at the time, and the concert was going on, and she was a little bit late, and I think she had just come from work, and I saw her, and, you know, being heavily involved in church, involved with different churches and youth camp and stuff like that, she was somebody new, somebody I didn't recognize, and to be upfront, she caught my eye.
Behave yourself,
yeah,
Ryan.
she caught my eye, and so I don't think I said a word to her. I don't even think I said God bless you to her. Just shook her hand, and she said that she was looking for somebody, and it was Janinzi, and I think it was Janinzi's dad actually. And so yeah, she came and um sorry, this story's going a lot longer
No,
than it
bro,
should,
go.
but
Hey, this is a
long story
podcast,
short,
man. This is a podcast.
she I think she went out for coffee or something and was hanging out with Janinzi and Mindy. And they girls talk. They're like, hey, did you meet anybody at the concert? And so Nancy said, she's like, yeah, I don't know his name, but he was at the door, tall, slender. And they were trying to think tall, slender. And I think at that time I was there with Moses Esparza and Nathaniel. And I think she said Moses' name. And they're all like, oh, Ryan. So like it clicked to them, like who she was talking about. And so I think they put in a good word for me. So shout out to them for
Shout out, shout out to
shout out to them
Medinas.
for putting in a good word for me. But yeah, so from there we kind of just, I don't know. Back then it was like probably that's how it still is today. I we were in the DMs just talking messages, just saying what's up. And
I was real young when that stuff was happening too. I think I was
yeah,
like 16.
16, yeah. So yeah, it was
When
20,
you guys were going through all that stuff.
22, 23, yeah.
I
So
remember I was like, is Ryan going to move over here to Kerman or is Nancy going to for Clovis?
yeah,
And that's when you were in Clovis.
Yep, I was in Clovis at that time. And so yeah, wow, yeah. So it'll be 10 years that we've kind of met and started talking. So I've known her for that long, but yeah, over the summer, just talking and getting to know each other and going to different youth events. And I think I asked her to be my girlfriend that fall, and she was my first and only girlfriend. So, so that was kind of cool. But I mean, it's probably cliche and funny to say it, but I was really involved in church. So it was like girls, I knew girls were there, and I of course had friends that were girls, but it wasn't something that was like
never got to like
just
the point where you guys were like serious.
yeah. It was, just had friends. And again, probably coming from my upbringing, from my parents, it was just like, you should have a job, you should have yourself put together first before you can really offer anything to anybody. And so, I always took that to heart and tried to have my life together before I could offer anything. And so I was in college at that time, of course. And yeah, it was, fast forward 10 years later, we're married 6 years now, have 3 beautiful kids, and we're blessed. So
that's amazing, dude. That's amazing.
yeah.
All right, so you got married, and then you guys stayed in Clovis, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Then were you still like after you guys were married? Were you still the youth leader?
Yeah, so I forget how many years, but yeah. So going back a little bit, I was in Sanger, and then my family and I moved to the Clovis Apostolic Church. And so when we got married, that's where we were at, and I stole her from Kerman. She always reminds me, but because that was the first church that she knew, and that was her family. But yeah, so I was still involved with youth leadership there, involved on the district level as well.
District level as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what were you for the district? What role did you play?
So I was, what position was I? I was treasurer, and I think I might have been vice president. It's too far back to remember, but yeah, I served on the youth board, and so helped put together district events, youth camps, all that stuff. So
wow. So how was that though, being the district? Because district, okay, what were the churches? Because I don't remember what the districts were. Because I know it's Clovis, right? Isn't Clovis in?
So it goes up. What is it? Up north to like Livingston Church, all the way down south to not Tulare, but Visalia. So basically all the apostolic churches in between those two were in the district. So it was like 27 churches.
That's a pretty big area. That's a pretty vast area.
Yeah.
So did you feel pressure when trying to plan events and stuff, or?
I don't think so. Just because I've served on really awesome boards at we were all a team. We all worked together, so it wasn't like one person was only doing one thing. We operated really well together. Um, so yeah,
That's
I
cool,
don't
man.
think I ever felt the pressure. I mean, there was things that I was a treasurer, so I had to take care of finances, and so that was a bit of a pressure, but it wasn't something that I was like doing alone because it was all,
That's
just
cool,
working
man.
together as a team. Yeah.
Um, I need to change this slide real quick,
Yeah. Yeah.
dude.
No worries.
Sorry, I'll probably cut this, or I might not. I might just leave it. You just keep talking, keep talking. Nah, just wait for me.
Okay.
Okay, we're back. We're back. Sorry for that. Hopefully the commercial was good. Okay, dude. So, married Nancy.
Yep.
You became the district treasurer for Apostolic. Um, are you still at Clovis?
No. So I left Clovis, and I'll go ahead and share that story. So, and it wasn't on bad terms or anything. I'll be up front first of
Preface.
all
You need a
with that.
preface.
Yeah, wasn't on bad terms. I have nothing but love for the Clovis Apostolic Church and everyone there. Pastor Oriana and his family were nothing but a blessing to me, and they're good friends. I've known them since, or they've known me probably since I was a baby, and so grew up together with Elizabeth, Joel, and Edgar, and so nothing but good things to say about them. But yeah, no longer at Clovis Apostolic Church.
So where are you attending now?
I am at Life Center, which is in the UPC, UPCI, with Pastor Tirso Gonzalez and First Lady Rachel Gonzalez. So
Life Center. I've heard of that before.
yeah, it's on. I forget
It's
the exact
Pentecostal, right? You
address.
said
Yeah,
UPC?
yeah, UPC.
Oh, cool.
So it's in that shopping center where like Blackbeard's is.
So explain to the audience.
Yeah.
What's the difference between apostolic
Oh man, you're
and
asking the wrong
Pentecost?
person.
Because I know. Okay, so I know they're very similar.
Very similar.
Okay?
Serve the same God for sure.
They're the same God.
Yeah.
But I know that the veil covering is a different factor, and then
Yeah.
I do, if I remember correctly, they have more like they cover like more. So
Yeah.
those are the external differences that
Right.
I've noticed.
Right.
Am I on that? Am I
you
correct?
you are spot on with that. Yeah. So you'll probably see them, or you've seen them around town. Long skirts, long sleeves.
Are you guys connected to the one here in Kermit?
I want to say yes. So
The-
I've only been there for a year now, and so I'm not as involved like with
so I asked that
district
question
stuff. No, yeah. Or because I don't know how their district works. It's definitely different than the Apostolic Assembly, but yeah, I'm pretty sure they're connected with Kerman, and they're a branch from Sanger. That's kind of their own entity now. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, so they broke off from the Sanger Church.
I know for people who don't know, Pentecostals and Apostolics are very more like they're charismatic.
Right.
Like
very charismatic.
very, very charismatic.
Yeah.
So that's cool. No, I grew up apostolic. So I think Cornerstone. So I go to Cornerstone.
Okay.
That's the pastor says he's Pentecostal.
Yeah,
but I think it's non-denominational.
Yeah, there's all kinds of different organizations, and
There's so many different, huh? What do you think of that? Because there's so many different. Like there's Baptists. There's from just a Christian, right? Like
Yeah.
So there's Calvinists. There's Baptists. There's Seventh-day Adventists.
Right.
There's Apostolics, Pentecostals, non-denominationals.
Named a lot more than I could think of.
Yeah, there's even a new one. I think it's like the Theonomists or something like that. So there's so many different. What do you think that is? Why do you think that is? You think it's like just because of different interpretations of the scriptures?
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. Because each organization has different rules, and they, get their rules from the Bible. So it all comes down to interpretation. I only know one way, and that's the Pentecostal Apostolic way. So that's all I know, and honestly couldn't imagine really being anywhere else. So yeah.
Well, yeah. Now, let's ask you another question now. Let's move on to the next subject.
Yes, sir.
It's actually not this. It's not a different subject. It's the same. It's still about you, but it's who has been a spiritual mentor for you that has walked you through scriptures, maybe has been there like for you during like
Sure.
tough times? Like, do you have somebody who's done that for you? Might be your father, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say it was my dad, or is my dad. So again, my dad being a minister, now he's an assistant pastor at Clovis Apostolic Church. He's always been my go-to. Um, and so yeah, I can't really say that I've ever had a mentor. I've had people, above me that were like youth pastors when I was a youth leader. But my dad was always that guy. So any question I had about scripture or about church in general, about life in general, it was always my dad.
It was always your dad.
Yep.
That's cool. What's your dad's name?
Richard.
Shout out to Richard.
Yep. Shout out to my pops.
Shout out to Ryan's pops, the guy who gave him the tallness.
Yeah, definitely got it from him.
And you have a brother too, right?
Yeah, my brother Brandon. He's not as tall as me, but he got the smarts, and I got the athleticism. At least when I was in high school, I'm not athletic anymore.
Are you saying that to also be like because are you the older bro?
Yeah. So
that's an older bro thing to say.
No matter what, he'll always be little bro.
Yeah,
physically and in
and in any other way.
Yeah.
But your brother has gone out and done like missionary work or something like that, right? I think I seen like him like
he's a world traveler for sure. So yeah,
it might not even be for missionary, it might be for college.
Yeah. So he's like the complete opposite of me. Again, short, smart. But yeah, after high school, went to college at Fresno State. I'm pretty sure it was on a full ride because he was in the Smith Camp Honors program there at Fresno State. And then after Fresno State, he went into the Peace Corps. And so Peace Corps is a U.S. government agency. But he was basically doing missionary work. So he was stationed in Tanzania, Africa. And he was there for about a year and a half, 2 years. And so he was actually a teacher out there. I think he taught like third grade level. But just, did a lot of humanitarian work and taught as well in a school out there. And he'd be a good person to talk to at some point.
Oh, for sure.
Because he's got some good stories.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, especially missionary work, right?
Yeah, so
That'd be interesting. Did he fight with like? I've heard like some crazy stories of missionaries who've gone to like Africa, and they experience what they've experienced is wild.
Yeah, I don't think he was. I know he visited some churches out there that were part of the Apostolic Assembly, because, I mean, he grew up in the same house, same way that I did, and so God was always center of everything. But yeah, he was able to find a church out there where he was at, and he even like helped raise funds.
Don't worry about it. It happens all the time.
Raise funds to send to them by asking Clovis Apostolic Church to send an offering out there, because
cool.
The church, if you've seen churches out there in Africa or have heard anything, or just in any third world country, it's like they're nothing compared to what we have. They don't have any of the resources or anything like that. And so yeah, he helped raise some money, and I think they like were able to build a baptistry and do some work around their church. And so
that there's this like train of thought I have where it's like, the scripture says it's easier for a camel to enter an eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God.
Right.
I don't know if you remember that scripture, but I mean, living in one of the richest countries in the world, like I've seen and I've heard like people who have done missionary work where like the hunger for God that they have over there is not even comparable to like how we are here.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like that's always interesting to get perspective like that, where it's like there's no like sometimes we might feel embarrassed a little bit, like, oh man, I don't want to be that Christian, right? That's like professing to everybody, right? But over there, it's like, yo, you ain't stopping it because like of the struggles that they go through and all that. So that's always an interesting perspective to have. Yeah. All right, man. Let me ask you, what do you think are some misconceptions about God that people have?
I'm glad you asked this because I was thinking about this earlier today. Um, God, of course, just being the highest power, all knowing, all perfect in every way, people think that either they're not good enough or he's too good to have that relationship with him. And so I think that it's something that people struggle with, whether they're in church, have known church their whole life, or they're outside of church, but they know of church, whether family members or friends. They see God as just this super high power, and it's like, I'm not good enough for him, so why would I even try to have a relationship with him or go to church? It's like, I just messed up this morning, or I did this, it's like, why even bother? But it's not the case, because God's grace is sufficient to cover a multitude of sins, and countless examples in the Bible where people committed murder and God forgave them, God still covered them. But yeah, people definitely, I mean, God is all those things. God's righteous, God is holy, and God is perfect in every way, but he is not too big that you can't have a relationship with him.
Yeah. No, that I heard this person describe it where God is so holy, he is so perfect and so holy that our sin separates us from him,
right,
more than we realize, because he can't have anything to do with sin and wickedness, right? And I understand people who feel that way too, where I see their point of view where it's like I always mess up, but I think sometimes it's the lack of understanding that you have to know that there's nothing you can do to be saved, because you're not saved by works, you're saved by grace.
Right.
And it says, because if it was from works, it would not be grace.
Right.
That's why it's a gift that God gives us. We don't deserve it. There's nothing we did to deserve this gift. Like there's no like pastor, minister, missionary. There's nobody that's good enough to deserve this gift that we have, which is grace. Right? And sometimes we can fall into the trap of I'm doing all right, like I'm a good person, right? So I should be good. Well, in reality, I was listening to this. It's the Living Waters Church. Shout out to Living Waters if they're listening. They're probably not. But the way that they do like work, right? In the sense of like they're going out and talking to people. They'll ask individuals, this is like, have you ever lied? Right? And I'd be like, obviously, like I'd ask you, have you ever lied? Like in your own life, have you ever said a lie?
Yep.
Okay, you're a liar. Have you ever stolen anything? Even downloading something that's not yours?
Yep.
Okay, so you're a lying thief. Have you ever used God's name in vain? Ever?
Yep.
Okay. Would you ever use your mother's name as a curse word? So back in the Old Testament, using God's name as something of disgust would be reason enough for the death sentence back in the Old Testament.
Right.
All right. So we've used God's name in vain. We're thieves. We're liars. Have you ever looked at a woman with lustfully in your entire life?
Yep.
All those four, right? So in Galatians, it talks about you're going to be judged two ways. So if you don't believe that Jesus Christ was sufficient enough to cover your sins, okay, well, now you're going to be judged by the law of Moses, right? The 10 Commandments.
Right.
So it's like, these are the two ways you're going to be judged. If you don't fully accept this one, and you don't believe it, well, you're going to be judged by the laws, right? And everybody has the laws because they're considered the moral law, right? The moral law. They're engraved in everybody. Right. That's why everybody, even if you don't have to be a believer to understand that killing somebody is wrong, right, because they're engraved in our hearts.
Right.
So it's like when you hear people say that, right, where it's like, oh, I'm not good enough, or like, it's like, let me just put the fear of God in you real quick. It's like, look, nobody's good enough. Right. You have to understand that.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like people put pastors on pedestals.
Yep.
Right. Where it's like, look, that not even a pastor you think is great is good enough.
Right.
There's nobody, man. That's why it's all Jesus. You have to 100% believe that Jesus Christ died for us. For the wages of sin is death, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when Jesus died, before he died, he said, "It is finished," right. Meaning he paid the debt. He paid the debt for us.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing, and people sometimes lack that understanding of that.
Yeah,
and I feel like if you don't understand that completely, then that's when I feel like that's where the danger is.
Yeah, because
now your faith isn't in Christ; it's in what have I done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a scary road to go by.
Yeah.
Right. Even like sometimes people, I'm a good person. I'm a good person. Where it's like, oh, really? I mean, if it's by the standards of God, no. Man, you're not. Nope. And understanding that, man, because sometimes people, they'll think like, oh, I would never do something. I would never do that. I would never do this. It's like, look, we're all wicked.
Mm-hmm.
And we got crazy thoughts nobody thinks of. Like, nobody's ever going to know.
Right.
Like, you probably have thought thoughts. I'm not throwing you under the bus. But, like, you probably thought thoughts and, like, you don't ever tell anybody about it because they're, like, trippy. It's like, why did I even think of that? Right? Yeah. Like, the only person who really knows you is God.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you.
Yep.
And that's it. So yeah, that's a little tangent I went on, but okay. it's very prevalent in the church right now.
Yeah,
where like they either feel like they're not good enough, which is the whole point. You're not.
Yeah.
Or they think it's like hyper graceness. So sometimes they'll use that works, right, where it's like you're not saved by works, you're saved by grace, right? Well, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
We are saved by grace, and there's nothing we could do. But faith produces works.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, if you truly believed, you would know that what you're doing is wrong. Like me, right? Like things I used to do before, I would sometimes justify my sin. Mm-hmm. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's not that big. I've now repented from thinking that way and even engaging that way, and even sometimes telling people like how I used to think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've repented from that, man. Like, so that's a no. Sin is wicked in the eyes of God. So for me to justify wickedness is super, super bad.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Man. But yeah, I feel you 100%, man. All right. What other misconception do you think people have about God? Like, it can be people in the church, or you think sometimes you hear things like that's going on in the world. It doesn't have to necessarily be around church.
I mean, thinking of the world and the world we live in right now, people don't think God is real.
Mm-hmm.
This whole, I guess a lot of it is based in science and whatnot, but just people think that the world is so bad. How could there possibly be a God? So I think that's a huge misconception and a huge reason that the enemy uses to blind people, to not even look in that direction. It's just, the world is so bad. People are dying every day. How could there be a God? And I can't speak on that, on why God allows certain things to happen, but I know that God is real and he allows things to happen. But yeah, that's definitely a huge thing in the world that we live in today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, people always say the science thing. It's like, you don't even know the science.
Yeah.
Stop acting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, yo, you ain't studying that. Like, you're just saying that because it's common to say.
Mm-hmm.
Because even the top scientists don't even know how the world was created.
Right.
You know what's trippy? I was having this thought today. It's like people like this new trend of the Matrix theory. Oh, the Matrix theory. That's just in like a fancier way and like a workaround of saying creation.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's the Matrix theory, somebody had to do the coding.
Right.
Right. Like one little, like I did Java coding for a little bit. One little dot, like one little period out of place, and the program could be messed up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like now you're making the argument. If you say the Matrix theory, you're making the argument of the fine tuning of the world. So it's like you're still saying somebody created the world. You just don't want to say God did it.
Yeah.
Right. And even if it was the Matrix, let's say we were in the Matrix, how we're going right now in our political, politically,
Mm-hmm.
if somebody created, if it's so farther in the future that somebody created the Matrix theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're going to, I'm imagining, instill the values that they have into the program.
Right.
So like they might have made girls and girls, like, you know, like the natural way. There's not even men.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all girls.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like girls can like just have babies.
Right.
So I don't know. That Matrix thing is like, it's funny because it's just a workaround of saying creation.
Right.
So that's what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, no. You know, obviously we do it with love and we're supposed to spread the gospel. But when somebody, you know, says, oh, no, science, it's like, look, dude, science has not refuted God at all. It's never
Mm-hmm.
disproven God.
Right.
Right. It's just proving the fine tuning of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like the natural law that God put
right.
on earth. Right. All that is the natural laws that he's put. So it's like, you're not refuting anything. Like I believe in science.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a huge misconception.
Yeah,
for sure. All right, Ryan. How long do you think we've been talking for?
I would say at least 30 minutes, 40 minutes.
It's been an hour, bro.
An hour?
Did it feel like an hour?
Yeah, I guess so.
It did?
Yeah, yeah.
Usually for me, it never feels like an hour. Like
Yeah.
for me, it doesn't feel like an hour. You want to hit a last point?
Yeah, definitely. Shoot.
Do you got a point?
Oh, do I got a point? I got a testimony to share
Just
that
do
I
it.
think I got a couple actually. So
all right,
I'll try
hey,
to-
bro, this is a podcast.
let's get to it because I think these have for sure shaped me in the past 6 years because the first testimony I'll share happened 6 years ago. And it's today's sermon at church was about faith, and I think that's definitely what I would like to speak on is just having faith in God. But these two instances in my life that have happened over the past 6 years have definitely grown my faith, and I think have propelled me for the foreseeable future. And it's like, no matter what happens, my faith is, faith itself is blind, but I can say that I have that blind faith in God that no matter what happens, you know, God's got me, God's going to take care of it. And even if it's not something that I want to happen, I know that my life is in God's hands. So with that being said,
You got me hooked.
It'll be a good one, I promise. So back in 2016, I married Nancy, May 28th, 2016. 2 weeks later, we're at Clovis Apostolic Church. My dad's preacher, minister. He gives a sermon. I can't remember the exact date, but it was a Sunday. It was a sermon on God's promises. I can't exactly remember what the exact message was, but it was living on God's promises. So the following day he goes to work, and my dad he's retired now. He worked at Sangre Unified, and he worked there for, it would have been 30 years. I think he made it to 30 years. So again, just seeing my dad in leadership roles and all the positions he held there and in church, it was definitely somebody that I looked up to and admired and wanted to emulate in some way. He worked all those years and he was never sick until that Monday. he would take rarely took days off because he was sick, but that Monday he was pretty ill. And so he went to work, just wasn't feeling right throughout the day. He told his secretary, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna take a nap and see if I feel
Mm.
better. Um, and so he did that, but didn't didn't feel any better. And so throughout that day, he just was getting worse and worse and was feeling groggy, just didn't know what was going on. He couldn't really eat. And again, he tried to sleep it off, but it wasn't going away, whatever it was that he was feeling. And so that night, he slept on the couch and was trying to get to his room, go to sleep for the night. And he was very weak and couldn't really walk. So my brother was helping him to his bed. And in the hallway, he pretty much like lost his balance and like, I mean, I wasn't there, but from what my brother said is like they both crashed into the wall and they like what is going on? Like why are you like they couldn't tell what was wrong. So took him back to the couch, went to sleep for the night, and my mom slept on the couch with him because she didn't want to, leave his side. And so they wake up Tuesday morning, um, or my mom wakes up and she goes to check on my dad, and he's unresponsive. He's not waking up. Um, he's breathing, but he's like my mom's trying to wake him up, like nothing's happening. And so this is again 2 weeks after I got married. So, 2 weeks. This was my first week back at work. And so they call me and say, "Hey, They told me the night before, like, "Hey, Dad doesn't look good. He's sick. We'll see how he does in the morning." So they call me Tuesday morning. They call the paramedics because he's not responding. So I'm at work and they say, "Hey, call the paramedics. Dad's going to the hospital." I was like, "Okay, I'm going to the hospital." I was only 10 minutes away. So they take him to Clovis Community Hospital. And I'm in the emergency room waiting for him. And my mom, my brother, and my aunt and my dad's cousin are like in the waiting room of the emergency room. And so it was very vivid. I remember it to this day. They wheel him in, and my dad, just the way he was breathing, there was like a literal rattling to his breathing. It didn't sound right, didn't sound good at all. And so they wheel him in. They start hooking him up to all these monitors. And at one point, I hear the nurses tending to him say, "I can't find a pulse." And I'm just there, like watching all of this happen, and just again, I've never seen my dad in the hospital. Rarely see him sick, other than the cold or flu. And so I just see this happening, and again, I hear, "I can't find a pulse." And so I can't remember what code it is that they call, but they call over the intercom, code red, code blue, whatever it is. And so even more nurses come into the room that we're in, and they start tending to him. And I remember hearing from my cousin, because they're in the waiting room and they hear the code, and they have a feeling, but they don't know, but they think it's for my dad. And so they kind of say like, "Man, I hope that's not for Rick." And so they start tending to my dad. They stabilize him, whatever. They brought the I forget what it's called, but the things to shock him.
Defibrillators.
Defibrillators. They didn't have to use it, thankfully, but they brought those. They were ready to go, but they were able to get a pulse. So they got him stabilized, and the head doctor that was there, he comes into the room, asks me to step out into the hallway so he can give me an update on my dad. And he tells me that my dad has suffered a severe stroke, and not just one, but multiple strokes.
Wow.
Multiple strokes, and basically, I'm pretty sure he said this, like, "I'm sorry, but there's nothing else that we can do for him here. So we're going to transfer him to Fresno Community Hospital, and they're better prepared to do things or take care of patients like your dad. And I'm very sorry. And he told me to go get my mom, and he told us the same thing together. And again, never experiencing like this with a parent, or my mom with her husband. But my mom just collapses right there in the hallway. She starts crying, and I don't know when this came up in my life, but it's probably from my upbringing. But I've always had the way I describe it is a blind faith, and I mean faith is pretty much blind, but I've always had a blind faith in God that, again, no matter what happens, God is with us. God will take care of us. And I remember telling my mom, and I was like, he's going to be okay. And I didn't know that for sure, but that's what I believed, that he's going to be okay, because we still need him. You still need him. I still need him. And again, this is 2 weeks after being married. So it's like, here I am on this high, and then bam, like almost losing my dad. And so they transfer him to Fresno Community. And again, this is on a Tuesday. And so we all rush over there, and he basically goes into, they take him to the surgery wherever he's going to be taken care of. And these doctors, they meet with my mom, myself. I think my brother was there, and my pastor at the time, Pastor Moya from Clovis Apostolic Church. We were all there just talking, praying. And at this point, I think word had got out. And so tons of coworkers of my dad, tons of church members, and this was pre-COVID. So we packed out probably 2 or 3 waiting rooms at the hospital. It was just a ton of people, family, friends, coworkers. And they were just all there in support of my family and my dad. And so yeah, the doctors were telling us, like, this is what we need to do. Your father, your husband, he suffered a major stroke. There's swelling in his brain. We need to remove part of his skull, because just the tension and the swelling is too much. If we don't do it, like, it could be really bad. And so they take him into surgery to do that. And so they basically told us, like, do we have your okay to do this? And they said, yeah, do whatever you can to save my dad. And so they give us, they said, all right, we're going to take him into emergency surgery. It'll be about 6 hours. And so, we're there just waiting with everybody that's there. And the surgeon comes out after the surgery's completed, and, he's basically said, we've done everything we could, and he's in God's hands. And when I heard that, that was affirmation to me that my dad was going to be okay. And, again, we've never been through something like that. And, that was the end of Tuesday. And so Wednesday comes, he's out of surgery. He's in the ICU. I live, closer to the hospital. So I'm there first thing in the morning, and my mom and my brother are getting ready to come later on. And so I go up to the ICU, and I just see my dad hooked up to everything imaginable. And again, never seen my dad like that. But I go up to his bed, and the nurse said that he's kind of responding, but he's still heavily sedated. And so we're going to see, like, how he comes off sedation. So again, suffered this major stroke, gone through a major surgery. Who knows how he's really going to come out of it. So yeah, I go up to his bedside. His back is turned towards me as I enter his room, and I just say, like, hey, Dad. And to my amazement, he kind of rolls over halfway, and I put my hand out, and he puts his hand on mine, and he kind of like starts caressing my hand, and like I lose it at that point. I'm just like, I couldn't believe it because I didn't expect that. And from what the doctors and nurses had said, like, that's not supposed to happen. And so he does that, and I just, I just rub his arm and I said, Dad, everything's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You're strong. You're a fighter. You'll be fine. You're going to make it. And I had to go call my mom and brother and tell them what happened, and just call him as soon as I could and say, hey, Dad, he responded, like, he heard me. He caressed my hand, like, he's going to be okay. Like, God is with us and he's going to be okay. And so, yeah, he a week later he was walking around the hospital. He had to go through therapy and all that to basically learn to walk, to talk, to drive again. But a week later he was already up and
moving.
And the doctors had, they had no explanation other than it was a miracle, and we knew that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so even that week, like, I think it was the time of the NBA finals, and I think it was the Cavaliers versus the Warriors at that time. And my dad was like asking about the game. He's like, what game is it? Like, and I'm like, bro, you just you just suffered this stroke. Like, why are you even worried about a game? Why do you even remember? Like, and there were people there that were visiting and talking to him, and he's over there like talking in Spanish and all this stuff, and he's like, he's good. And it's just amazing to see his, like, how well he did for the situation that he was in.
Yeah.
And of course it was all God. It was a miracle. And it took him some time to recover. I think he was in the hospital for like 20 days, 21 days or something. And yeah, he was able to come home. You see him today, you would never think that he went through what he did, because normally when people have strokes, like, their a side goes limp or something. But the severity of the stroke that he suffered, there was like no sign. They don't know why it happened. They don't know how it happened.
Is it prevalent in your guys' family?
We've had family members who have suffered strokes, but it's not like something that happens like common. But yeah.
That's awesome, dude. Like, I remember seeing your dad because I went to Clovis like about a year ago.
Yeah.
2 years ago, a year and a half ago. And I remember seeing your dad, and I would never think, he seemed fine to me. Like, I would not assume that he went through that. I remember hearing about that, actually.
Yeah.
But very vaguely, I remember.
Yeah.
That's so crazy, though, man. That's so cool.
I posted like every update I could on Facebook, and people were praying we have relatives all over the US, and he knows people all over the US, so people were praying from the East Coast to the West Coast. And
that's
it's like,
so cool.
And he's a person that when people are sick in the hospital or whatever, he's the one that goes to pray for people. And
that was his ministry. You do that?
Like, he just does that, like, being the person that he is and being a minister. Like, he's always a person that prays for family members, for friends, whatever, and people know him and know that he's a minister. And so whenever they need something, like, they'll ask him to pray.
That's super cool, man. What did he say he went through, though? Like, what does he recall?
He doesn't recall anything. It was just like he went to sleep.
No,
he said
way.
if he would have died, he wouldn't have known.
Wow.
Yeah, he doesn't. I think he vaguely remembers being sick at work that Monday. He remembers preaching that Sunday, but everything after that is like,
it's
just like he went to sleep.
Thank God, man.
Yeah.
Thank God.
All God. But yeah, he had to go through therapy. He had to basically learn to walk, learn to drive. His talk or his speech was a little bit impaired, but he was able to communicate and all that. So again, seeing him today, you would never think that he went through what he went through. And being where we are now, it's like he's retired. I have 3 kids. Like, he's a full-time grandpa. He's awesome. The best grandpa. That's awesome. My kids love him. But God knew that we still needed him, and he brought him through.
That's
So
awesome, bro. Yeah,
yeah,
we serve a mighty God,
yeah,
and he's, if it's not their time to go, they're not gonna go.
yeah.
So that's super cool, man.
I can't explain why we were lucky in still having him, because there's others that gone through similar or even lesser things, and you know they're not here anymore. But by the grace of God, he's here. He's still
By the grace of
preaching,
God.
still busy. So
Well, it's like that faith that Job had.
yeah,
You know, he's like, I don't know why this is going on. I mean, he had questions,
yeah,
but he still praised God.
yeah,
So that's beautiful, man.
yeah.
That's
And
that's
even while we were there in the hospital, it's like we helped or we prayed with other families, and we tried to be an example, like, hey, God did this for us, like he can do it for you too. And that's, it's still a testimony that we enjoy sharing. And it's like, yeah, God did it. God did it for us, and he can do it for you.
that's freaking cool.
Yeah.
A little testimony right away.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And you said you had another one?
Yeah. Another one just happened this past year with my wife and third baby, Timothy. Shout out to Timothy. He'll
Shout
probably
out to Timothy.
I'll show
Shout
him
out to
this
Tim.
on this post, but he's about to turn 1. But last January, I think it was January 10th, the second or third week of January. I forget how far along my wife was. I think she was 30 weeks. She goes in for her routine checkup at the doctor's, and they do whatever tests that they run, and they normally, so I think this was maybe the one or two times that I didn't go with her, because I usually always go with her on her appointments just to be there. But this time I didn't go, and they tell her, like, there's some levels that are elevated in whatever tests that they ran, and they want her to go get some extra tests at the hospital. So her doctor is right there at Clovis Community, and so short walk to the hospital. But they run some more tests, and they tell her, like, yeah, you're not in the best shape. And so she's already, like, anemic, and through her pregnancy she's had to get, like, iron transfusions because she has low iron count. And so she had already been doing that, but still it wasn't enough to get her where she needed to be. And so something was off, and so they admitted her to the hospital. And this is prime COVID time. And so she is basically in the hospital for, I forget how long. Well, it was until my son was born, and then so that was at least 4 weeks that she was in the hospital. But she was in the hospital all by herself, and I couldn't, because of COVID, I couldn't be there with her. And so I'm at home trying to be super dad as best as I could with
She
my
had
two.
COVID, you said?
Oh yeah, that was this was during COVID time.
But did she have it?
And she actually got,
because I had a baby on 2020 March.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, August 2020.
Yeah.
So right. But they told me if she comes out positive, or if I'm positive,
Mm-hmm.
I can't be there.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like freaking out. I was like, oh.
Yeah. So yeah, this was in 2022, spring 2022. And so yeah, she ended up, and she wasn't sick, but she had COVID. And so on top of the normal COVID guidelines of me not being able to be there, now that she had COVID, like, I think it was 2 weeks after that maybe I could go and be with her.
Wow.
But yeah, she wasn't in good shape. She needed to be monitored heavily, and the condition she had was preeclampsia. So on top of already kind of having a risky pregnancy, she has this condition. It's COVID, and she can't have any visitors or have anyone with her. And so I'm at home trying to keep things together. Thankfully my parents are there, and I relied heavily on them. But I was going to work, trying to take care of my kids, and worrying about my wife and unborn baby if they're even going to make it, because from the tests from there on, it's like at 30 weeks, the baby's not fully developed. He's small,
Wow.
even smaller than what he should be at 30 weeks.
So it was a pre baby.
Yeah. So she ended up having him on 2/2/22, February 2nd, 22.
22.
He was born at 36 weeks, but he was born at 3 pounds 7 ounces.
Wow.
Tiny little thing. So even
Man.
smaller than any other regular 36-week baby.
Yeah, because 36 weeks is almost full.
Almost full term, but yeah,
And
he
he's
was only
three.
3 pounds.
Oh my.
And so even at that time, like we didn't really have a name for him yet. We were just trying to think of names, and of course he came early, so just threw us off that much more. But we ended up naming him Timothy, from the book in the Bible, and the Timothy in the Bible. But Timothy in the Bible was known for his youth, and so we felt like it fit with our son Timothy. And then once we thought of it and landed on it, we're like, yeah, he's
That's
Timothy.
cool.
And my wife Nancy, she even had a dream about, even before we knew it was a boy or anything, that we were going to have a son, and the name Timothy popped up in her dream, and his name was Timothy. So the name Timothy always stuck with us, but we never like settled on it, even up until when he was born. And he was also a surprise gender, because we already had my 5-year-old son and we had a daughter, and so we were just like, this will be a surprise.
Oh, that's cool.
We already
That's
had the
cool.
boy and the girl. So yeah, we found out he was a boy. His name was Timothy, and yeah, he's our little miracle baby, because
That's so cool, man.
he went through all of that, and like he was in the hospital for a good, because I guess the general rule is when it's a premature baby that they can't be released until they're full, what they would have been full term, so 40 weeks. So he was in the hospital for a little bit shorter. So he was in there 3 weeks, but he was only in there shorter time because he was, even though he was small, like he didn't need like breathing tube or anything like that. He was just improving so much, and all the nurses took great care of him, and we were able to be with him once he was born, even with COVID restrictions. But yeah, so even when my wife was sick before the baby was born, like I wasn't supposed to be in there, but for whatever reason, there were a few times where like I was able to not really sneak in, but they let me in, even though they weren't really supposed to because of all the COVID restrictions. But I found favor in that, because they would even tell us like, you're not supposed to be in here, but we'll let you in.
That's cool.
Just because of my wife's case and all that. So yeah, and so it's a year later now, and
healthy boy.
Oh yeah, he's healthy. He's starting to walk, and he's just he takes after my wife, because he's got the curly hair, he's got the dimple, so that's,
oh man, that's beautiful.
That's all
man.
her. But yeah, he's doing great, and we're blessed, and he's our little miracle baby.
That's so awesome.
Yep.
And I bet I can't even imagine how hard that is too, for her to be by herself doing all that.
Yeah, and it was, yeah, she was alone. There was one time where I was able to take my other kids, because they were able to take her outside, so we had like a little lunch date with her, and
that
was her first time seeing the kids in like 4 weeks. And
that's cool, man.
But because her case was so severe, like we didn't know if she was really going to make it, or if the baby was going to make it. So it's like, if worse comes to worse, like we gotta at least let her see her kids. And
oh yeah.
So they made it happen. But yeah, we, again, just
thank God,
living on God's promises, living on faith in God. That was what kept us going. And it was rough, because like that's my life partner,
Oh, for sure, dude.
I
can't even imagine
trying to keep my world together and worrying about my wife and unborn child. It's like there were times I cried myself to sleep at night, and just, again, it was going back to God and my faith and just, God, I need her. It's like I can't I can't live this life alone without her. So God made a way, and she's still here, and Timothy's here. So
That's awesome, man.
yeah.
And I know I don't really know how you feel in regards to losing, but I remember when they gave my wife the shot on the back.
Oh yeah.
Was it epidural?
Epidural, yeah.
So supposedly, I didn't know this, that they're, they can pass sometimes because the epidural travels up to the brain
Mm-hmm.
and the brain shuts down.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So when they did it to my wife, at first they jabbed her like 4 times. They couldn't find her, I guess, the right place to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then and so they finally get it done. But then my wife, she's like kind of like, she's not laying down, but you know how she is, and she goes, I'm feeling numb on my face. Right? She tells me privately. She's like, I feel like my face is going numb. And I was like, I mean, I didn't know like what to do. So I'm like, let's tell the nurses. And so my wife goes, am I supposed to feel numb on my face? And then you just see the 2 nurses, man. Oh, my heart dropped when it happened. They just both looked at her like, you're feeling numb? And then I was like, that's not a normal reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Yeah.
So then they just, thank God it was all they had to do was elevate her so that it stopped traveling so much up, and it, gravity would force it down.
Yeah.
But just that little moment, I was like, my heart dropped in that moment, even though it was like a second, it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, don't do like, so I can't even imagine for you,
Yeah.
man. But thank God, man. Thank God we serve an amazing God,
Amen.
and
It's all
if
God.
it's not our time to go, it's not our time to go, man. Okay, dude. 1 hour and 32 minutes. That's freaking awesome.
That went by fast.
It went by fast, huh?
Didn't expect it to be that long.
It was great conversation too, man.
Yeah.
Because
Good
so
catching
many people are gonna relate to you in the sense of that, of like feeling, especially if they grew up in the church.
Yeah.
Because I knew some people who that's how they felt too. So
Yeah.
that's awesome, bro.
I hope so, because I know there's a lot of people that grew up in church, similar backgrounds to us, and they're not in church anymore for whatever reason. And so
We got to pray for them.
got to pray for them, and I could only hope that, this offers some hope, like no matter what you go through, no matter whatever feeling of unworthiness they might be feeling, not being good enough. You don't have to be good to get God, You just get God, and He makes you good. So
Yeah, it gives you, whether it makes your heart, takes away your heart of stone, and I don't remember that verse completely. I've been paraphrasing too much too on the previous ones.
That's okay.
I've been telling people I got to memorize them more because I know what I'm talking about, but then when it comes to recalling the information in the spot, it's like and then I feel like, man.
Yeah.
But it's all good, because you know what? It doesn't matter what people think about me. But anyways, that could be a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so what church do you turn to now? It's Life Center.
Life Center, yeah, Life Center.
Life Center. So
that's Pastor Tirso Gonzalez. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook.
I'll tag it on Instagram. Just send me the Instagram and I'll tag it down below. But thank you guys for tuning in. Shout out to Ryan. He came from Fresno. Oh wait, where is it? Where are you? Clovis.
Outskirts of Clovis.
Outskirts, almost Sanger.
Yep.
He came from Clovis. So I just want to say I appreciate you, man, for coming out. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That's a drive. I didn't even know. I thought it was Fresno. Like, it's only 20 minutes. Oh, no, dude. That's Sanger. I think it's like Quail Lakes area.
Yeah, well, it's actually right there by Clovis Community Hospital. So
oh, really?
Yeah, at the end.
That's where my wife gave birth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a 40-minute drive, bro. That's like 35 minutes.
Made it.
I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate
Shout
you.
out to Ryan's. I'll tag his the church he attends to, and then I'll also tag his professional photo account. If you guys ever need photos,
I do it all.
He does it all. He's a man of many traits, and he could speak the gospel to you, which is always a nice cherry on top. But other than that, thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys have any questions you would like to ask future guests, please leave it in the comments or send me a DM on our Instagram account, and let me know where I can or can't improve. I need the feedback, as much feedback as I can get. But with that being said, thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye. God bless.
God bless.